Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we're good.
Excellent.
Probably the smoothest start we've had so far.
Love to hear it.
There's always been some kind of technical thing or scheduling thing, but this is so far off to a very good start. So I guess the first thing I have for you is most important question. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I did a bunch of shooting today. I'm working on a new project and I had to shoot a ton of like exercise demos. So 3 hours straight of demoing exercises. So exhausted, but feeling very accomplished.
So what is that like demoing exercises?
So basically I'm creating like an exercise library. So I need to do an example of each exercise. So like back squats, I'll do 5 reps, we'll film it. Then we'll do lunges, good mornings. So like back to back to back, just shooting exercises.
Do you do you throw on a lot of weight for that, or you just kind of put something on the bar and go for it?
Yeah, I was doing like 85 pounds. Yeah, something that I can sustain for 3 hours because you don't want to burn out.
So I guess what got you into this side of lifting? Because there's a lot of different avenues you can go down, and I think you're in a very unique spot in terms of you have a pro card in bodybuilding and you have a certification as a CrossFit coach, but a lot of what you do is more of this exercise library stuff like that. What kind of got you down that path?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. I've done so many different things in fitness. I think kind of my gateway into fitness was more CrossFit functional lifting. That was where I started. And then I kind of expanded from there. So I got into competitive Olympic weightlifting for a little bit. And then I got into competitive powerlifting and then bodybuilding. So it was kind of like I get bored or I kind of max out my potential in one sport. And so then I kind of switch gears. And so now it's kind of full circle. I do a little bit of everything still. I do a lot of CrossFit. I do a lot of bodybuilding, a lot of powerlifting, and then a lot of more general fitness. So I think kind of what I've noticed is, the vast majority of people are not in these niches. Like the CrossFit community is relatively small. The powerlifting community is relatively small. So if I want to reach more people, I need to think a little bit more broad and just more general physical fitness.
Makes sense. Yeah, a lot of the people that spoken with before have been, bodybuilders, but the first guy I spoke to, he's been an NPC top level competitor in bodybuilding for the past 15 years, and that's all he does is bodybuilding. And it's interesting talking with him, but most people aren't going to be like that,
Right.
or most people aren't going to be training to win the world's strongest man or go to IPF Worlds or something like that. So I think you have a very I mean, you can tell based on how many people are showing up in the chat, a lot of different people are interested in seeing the kind of stuff that you're doing. You're not just, a CrossFit specialist. You're not just doing bodybuilding, although you are our first professional bodybuilder um, with pro cards. That's exciting.
Love it.
Um, so I guess where are you from and how old are you?
Um, so I grew up in Nebraska and then moved to New York City, lived there for about 10 years, and then went to Cornell in upstate New York. Graduated from Cornell, and then we moved to Houston, where I live now. So based in Houston, and I am 35 years old.
So you got your master's at Cornell. Was that deliberately because of lifting or what kind of, how'd you bridge those two?
No, I wasn't even into lifting, actually. I actually started to like experiment with lifting my like last semester at Cornell. So yeah, I mean, the reason I went to Cornell was just because I was in New York, so I was looking at New York-based master's programs. So I really only applied to New York schools like Columbia, Stern, Cornell, and so that's kind of why I ended up at Cornell. But yeah, I wish I had been into lifting sooner, so I could have taken advantage of the Cornell community better, because I really just got into it at the tail end.
So what were you going to school for then? Just getting a master's for the sake of getting one, or do you have a particular industry you wanted that would enhance having that degree?
Yeah, so I got my MBA, so Master's of Business. I didn't really know at the time kind of where I wanted to go. So prior to business school, I was working in the fashion industry in New York City, but I kind of wanted to pivot out of that. I was over it, and so I figured an MBA would be a good way to transition into a different career path. And as I kind of pursued my MBA, I thought of a few different paths I could have taken. I thought about marketing, I thought about finance for a while, and then I ultimately settled on consulting, management consulting. And management consulting is like broad, so it's not necessarily industry specific. I was kind of doing like strategy consulting. So out of school, I got a job with Deloitte, and so I did strategy consulting with Deloitte for 2 years before I decided I actually hated that too. And then I completely changed and started doing fitness stuff full time.
So I was kind of lost my train of thought there. Was there, so I know you do a lot of fitness modeling right now. Did you start that when you were in the fashion industry? And has there been kind of a crossover between the two, or is it just complete pivot and you were more behind the scenes back then? What was that like?
I did some modeling before, never like super professionally. I mean, I did some commercial shoots, but it would be like, because I was so connected in the fashion industry, a lot of times people would just be like, hey, can you model for this? So I ended up doing like a fair amount of modeling when I was young, like my very early 20s. So once I started doing fitness, it was like a really natural kind of transition to start doing fitness modeling. So yeah, there was a little bit of a connection there. I was never like a full-time model.
Interesting. So it seems like you've kind of each stage is built upon the other, really, in terms of, right, you've got the fashion, and then I think you said you got into CrossFit first.
Yeah,
So that's a good way to expose yourself to a variety of different training styles. You know, you say you did powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting. That's seems to be a pattern of building on your past experiences.
absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm grateful for all my experiences because it's definitely something I've built on.
So would you say that lifting as a general part of your life, say for the past 7, 8 years, however long, has been positive or negative? And do you think that's impacted any more than, maybe not more than your degree, but in terms of finding a direction and focusing your skills?
Yeah, I mean, lifting has changed my life. I mean, it's my life now. I would have never thought that, like 10 years ago or whatever. Um, it changed my life in a lot of ways. I mean, so you think about kind of my relationship with my body, coming from the fashion industry, right? It's like there's so much pressure to look a certain way and you're never feeling good enough. And then when you start doing like functional fitness or lifting, you start to like appreciate what your body can do. And that was like just, whoa, like such a game changer when that shift happened. And then, thinking about self-esteem and self-efficacy, like when you're learning to lift, you're building this belief in yourself because you're seeing that you can actually achieve these hard things. And that is like an amazing feeling. And lifting definitely did that for me. And then, it also changed my career. So now I'm, making a living doing something that I'm like passionate about, like a hobby. And that's crazy. That's so cool as well. So it's transformed my life in many different ways.
So when you were, I guess you didn't say you didn't do a lot of it, but when you were more in the fashion industry and doing that kind of modeling type work, I assume you were not necessarily studying, but your nutrition was probably a major part of that too, right? Would you say that was more so? Because you have to be, I guess, in that industry, they demand a certain kind of leanness.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that you say you did the modeling before you got into lifting. So were you just always a lean person, or were you just very strict with your diet? What was that like?
That's a good question. The way I approached my nutrition before I was educated about it versus now, yeah, it's totally different. Like, so, things have changed a little bit, but the standard of beauty back when I was working in the fashion industry was like thin, like as thin as possible. So really it was just like, trying to eat as little as possible. And so like, not to say it was all negative, like I did learn about like caloric density and lots of like dieting techniques. And I think a lot of those, some of them healthy habits, some of them not so healthy, have like stayed with me. Learning just about like which foods can keep you full, which foods are more calorically dense, like all of that stuff. Like I definitely was thinking about that in my early 20s because I was trying to be like incredibly thin. But now it's a little bit different because I'm thinking about being strong and also lean. So yes, being lean also requires some of that caloric restriction, some of that work, but I'm also thinking about how can I support my muscles so that they stay big and stay strong while I'm dieting down.
Have you seen a change in the fashion industry in the past 10, 15 years or so in terms of more of a trend towards what you do now in terms of the functional fitness look for a model as opposed to just being as thin as possible?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely shifts. I don't see a lot of like muscular women still kind of on the forefront of fashion, but definitely curvier women are having a moment. So I think that's awesome. I think you're seeing a huge shift, right, in body positivity and different body shapes and sizes. All the way to the top of those fashion magazines, fashion worlds, like they are finally starting to shift. So I think that's opening up the doors for all types of body types, including, muscular women. Although I couldn't name like a top model who is muscular, right? But maybe someday.
So you have a fairly large Instagram following at this point. A lot of people have hopped on here. Do you think, how have you been able to grow that? Do you credit that with I mean, obviously you have to put out good content for that, but being able to know how to reach people. I'm not sure how long you've had your account, but
Mhm.
35,000 followers is a lot of people who are interested in your content. How have you been able to figure out how to market that?
So it's really been in like the past year that I've seen growth. And it's amazing. Like I'm so grateful for everyone who follows me. But I think a lot of it, like it shifted during the pandemic and it really shifted when I started doing TikTok, honestly. And I think short form video really opened up some doors for me. People were very responsive to it. I think people saw a different side of me, which is cool because I hate still photos. Like I hate just like taking a sexy picture on the beach. Like, I did some of that stuff, but it's like, it's very one note. And it's like, I don't think I look that good on the beach. Like there's other things I'd rather be talking about and doing. So I think once I figured out that short format video was like a good medium for me to communicate with people, things really started to take off. So my TikTok really took off and some of that translated into Instagram. And then Instagram introduced Reels. And so that really helped me grow and reach more people as well.
I imagine it must be pretty hard to be a female strength. I guess influencer is not really the right word for it, but there's a lot of people in the past year who came out with similar, kind of stay fit at home programs.
Mm.
So to be able to come out and have a strong following, because as I don't have TikTok, but from what I've seen, it's one video can make you famous for an hour. But I think if you specifically can stay consistently relevant in that realm, that's an impressive accomplishment.
Thank you.
Um, so I guess is you also have a coaching service, right?
I do. Hmm.
Is that your full-time job?
So yeah, I would say it's part of what I do. I do a few like different online things. I work with brands and stuff as well, so some of that makes up part of my income. But I'd say my online coaching platform is kind of my bread and butter.
So what kind of coaching do you do? Bodybuilding, CrossFit, nutrition, stuff like that?
Yeah, all of the above. So I do like one-on-one coaching where I help people who have any sort of fitness goal. So I have a lot of beginners, and then I also have people who are like hardcore, CrossFitters. So I can kind of speak to a few different audiences. I don't work with a lot of competitors. I have done one bodybuilding competitor that I helped get to stage, but generally, like I help mostly women who want to transform their body. And they all have different interests, different styles of working out, different styles of nutrition. So I help them navigate like their likes and preferences with their goals and kind of help meet in the middle.
So have you seen a difference in terms of, I guess, the few professional or I guess really hardcore people that you've trained versus the average person who just wants to lose a little weight or get in shape or get a little stronger? Like how do you differentiate someone prepping for a bodybuilding show and someone who wants to fit into a certain pair of pants?
I always think it's like more similar than it is different. I think people assume that there are these like vastly different strategies. Like, oh, well, like, Sarah, I'm not like you. You know, people always say that to me. I'm not like you. I don't want to be like you. I don't need to be like a stage lean. And I'm like, I get it, but weight loss is a caloric deficit, whether you're a bodybuilder or not. And I think if you pretend like, oh, well, it's hard for you, but it'll be easy for me because I only want to lose 10 pounds. I think like if you have that attitude, you're probably not going to lose the weight. But if you approach it like, I want to lose 10 pounds like a bodybuilder, like I have a date in mind where I want to lose the weight and I have that goal and I'm going to set it, like those people are way more successful with me because they take it seriously. And I think weight loss is hard for everybody. You know, I think, you know, of course, there's someone who's like, oh, I stopped drinking soda and I lost 20 pounds. Like, sure. But I think most women who I work with have tried like everything and they like aren't losing weight. And a lot of times it's just like a mindset shift that they need. They need to start like taking it seriously like a competitor and they'll see better results that way. So yeah, I think, I mean, there are some differences, you know, like I work with some people who count macros and some people who don't. And like not everyone has to count calories and macros. Like I understand that there is a downside to that. It can make you kind of obsessive. It can be very tedious. It can interfere with your life. So if there's someone who likes that sort of meticulous behavior, I'll help them down that path of counting macros. But if someone doesn't, then it's not going to be as precise, but you know, there are still ways that they can set themselves up for success and still lose weight without counting macros and calories. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically you tell people not to eat donuts, breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Yeah,
right? You know,
exactly.
tempting as that is. Yeah, because there's another person that I follow who he's a strongman, but he also one of a recent part of his business has been a lot of women have come to him to prepare for photo shoots. So I guess somewhat similar to what you've described yourself as doing. And you know, he's training to break all these Irish records, but he's also training these women who want to, you know, look good for a picture. And it's just one photo shoot. And he's talked very similar to what you're saying, how, you know, it's a caloric deficit is a caloric deficit. It doesn't matter if you're, you know, Brian Shaw at 6'8" and 440 pounds,
Mm,
or just the average person walking around.
right.
And yeah. Um, So how do you try to improve your performance as, I guess, a coach and an athlete? Do you have your own coach? Do you work on your nutrition? How much literature do you read about this sort of industry and the physical components of it?
Oh, yeah, I'm such a nerd about fitness. So, like, you know, obviously I went to Cornell, I'm into to education. I love podcasts, articles, books. I don't know if you know Mass monthly applications and strength sport. That's like one of my favorite resources for like the up-to-date research on fitness. So I do try to stay up to date with all the research, and all the podcasts are really helpful for that as well. Um, I have coaches, like sometimes I struggle with coaching because I like to do my own thing and experiment too much. So sometimes someone will give me a plan and I'm like, I'm going to deviate. But I have someone helping me with my macros because I'm prepping right now for a show. And he's really helping me stay accountable more than anything else. I think having to check in every week keeps me accountable. And I've worked with other coaches in the past on programming. So just working with a coach, you learn a different programming style. And in turn, when I program for other people, I implement those things all the time. So definitely that. And also I have a posing coach and she's amazing because posing I hate. I like despise it. So having a posing coach is like absolutely necessary for me because I don't know what I'm doing. um, and then, yeah, so I guess that's the big one. I spend a lot of time reading and researching, and then I also try to learn from other people when I can.
I've noticed that I think it's more women who do the research it seems like a lot more female coaches. There are a lot of men who do it too, but I've noticed there seem to be a majority of female coaches and athletes who will read through the Mass magazine, or I saw a book at the I work at a library, so one of the books I was shelving today was like the anatomy of a weightlifter and going through the different muscle groups and you know what you're using triceps for bench press and chest and stuff like that. But I've noticed there's a lot more, you know, meathead guys who are like, oh well, it's just a bench, bro. You just bring it down to your chest and push it back up. And as opposed to, it seems like there's more of a thoughtful side, and more carefully considering things from female coaches.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think women in general too have like more of imposter syndrome. They always feel like they're not doing it right. Like I notice when I coach women, they always think that their form is wrong. Like it's always like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. I know I'm doing this wrong. And like men never say that to me. It's like, and usually half the time they're doing it right, you know? So they have this insecurity, I think sometimes that men don't have. So I think that's probably why they like overdo the research and the education side of it as well.
Think the insecurity that the men have is probably expressed more in the ego lifting, where
Yeah.
someone could say they're fine when they're you see this in like the football team when they if you ever watch there's very funny videos on YouTube. Watch a college football team lift. You've got people just bouncing stuff off their chest,
Hmm.
and they can make fun of me because they're lifting more, but I'm like, oh, I can bounce stuff too. It's not that impressive. Um,
Yeah, you see that more with men. Women tend to be like
yeah,
range of motion, like lighter weights, perfect form. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and I think the better male coaches are the ones who do similar kind of research. They look into the nutritional side of things and what's the latest science on blood work
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And I think it's if people can bridge that gap, because there are times where you know if you're deadlifting, the bar is on the ground, it needs to go up, and you just kind of have to attack it. But the other 99% of the time, it's all right. Set your feet, make sure your hand placement's good.
Yeah.
There's definitely a gap between those two that I think is slowly coming together.
Yeah, you need a little bit of both, right? Like there's
Yeah,
the overly cautious person who will never max out their deadlift because they feel like they're going to throw out their back. And I'm like, you're fine. You've been training for this forever. Like you can go heavier. So yeah, you need a little bit of both sides.
yeah. And so, how have you seen Instagram affect fitness and fashion in the past 10 years or so? Because I'm speaking of imposter syndrome, I know for me, um, I'm 200 pounds. I see people 70 pounds less than me lifting 700 pound sumo off the ground. It feels like I should just give up because I'll never reach the skinny USAPL sumo pullers. But do you see that on the female side as well? When I know people touch up their pictures when they post them and stuff like that. How have you seen that on your side of fitness?
Yeah, so from like the aesthetic standpoint, it's brutal, right? Like I think like Instagram as a medium rewards very like eye-catching photos. And what is eye-catching? Well, like, shredded bodies, like very like perfect proportions, hourglass figures. Like that's all over my explore feed. Like I go on my explore feed, I'm like, whoa, these bodies are insane. And so yeah, it can be like extremely discouraging. I know like when I'm prepping for a show and I'm scrolling too much, sometimes I'm like, ugh, like I don't even want to compete. Like I just feel like I'm too scrawny, I'm too square, like whatever. It can be incredibly discouraging. So I think, there's definitely a movement now towards like less filtering, more raw. And I think video is great for that, right? Because it's a lot harder to retouch video. So you see more real bodies on TikTok and more video formats, which I think people really like to see. So that's a positive shift in the right direction. It's never going to be perfect because even I am attracted to my body when I'm lean. Like, and even though lean is not necessarily healthy, so I in my own head have to reconcile that difference. Like, there's a trade-off between looking good and feeling good and what kind of message do I want to send out. And yeah, so I think it's a tricky thing, but it is shifting a little bit.
I think there's also a role for people like you who can say something like that, where you know it's okay to not look perfect when the video is rolling or something like that. Like for me, um, I'm 19-year-old guy. A lot of the people that my people my age look up to are all these guys on TikTok who are on SARMs and say, "Oh, it's just hard work, and all I do is, I just eat my rice and blast trend." And but then if you have someone like I don't know if you know Noel Diesel,
Mm-mm.
He's a South African bodybuilder,
Yeah.
and he's talked a lot. He's IFBB pro, big dude, and he talks about how everyone at their stage is fine, and you're just doing your best, and that's okay. And to see people at your level, at his level, sort of speak to your audience like that, I think is very reassuring to, no one wants to hear it from me, but if you guys are saying stuff like that, that can lead more of a cultural shift of, okay, maybe it is cool that I can lift this or be this lean, even if I'm not, 2% body fat or some ridiculous number.
Yeah, well, I'm flattered that you think I have influence and power in that respect, because I do try to, try to send a good message, but sometimes I feel like I'm just a little guy too. And you're like, well, if I post unflattering pictures, like I'm going to lose followers, but if someone bigger than me does, like it's okay. Like their fans love it. So I get in that comparison game a little bit too. So that's a good reminder. Thank you.
You have, like, I don't know how many people you have on TikTok, but 35,000 people, still 35,000 people on Instagram.
Yeah.
You know,
A lot of,
say 10,000 of those people are bots. Okay, that's still 25,000.
yeah.
That's a big audience who is following you to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
So, what
True.
would you, so what have you gotten out of the gym aside from a career, I guess? Would you say it's helped with sort of marketing and personal responsibility, learning those crafts that maybe you couldn't have gotten just out of the classroom?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess lifting and turning it into my career has turned me like into an entrepreneur, and that's something I did not see coming. And so that's comes with its whole host of skills that I've had to learn. Yeah, how to market myself, how to run a business. I have to do everything now, because I am my own entity. So from that respect, yes. But I guess I don't know if you just meant like life lessons from lifting.
Uh,
A little
Not
bit of,
necessarily. We can get to that later.
yeah, I think I kind of touched on that earlier. So yeah, we kind of covered that.
Hi, Becca. Um, uh, so I guess sort of winding down here, what kind of goals do you have for the future for, your company, yourself, growing your TikTok and your Instagram? Where do you kind of see yourself in the next 10 years or so?
It's a good question. I do want to grow my business. I feel like sometimes it's hard when I'm trying to also be an athlete and everything else. I feel like I don't put enough time into my own business. So it's something I'm really trying to focus on this second half of the year and beyond. Um, I'd like to continue to grow and to have more of my own products. So more programs and stuff that I can share with people. Because I think with online coaching, it's very limited how many people I can help because it's very time consuming. So I'd like to move away from the one-on-one stuff and actually do like more, online programs where I can share with more people. So that, yeah. And then as far as like where I see myself with lifting and competing, like we'll see. I think I would like to continue to do bodybuilding a little bit, compete on the pro circuit and see how I like it. And then, yeah, we'll just take it year by year. It's very hard on your bodybuilding. So I probably at some point should take some time off and like let my hormones heal. But hopefully still stay engaged in lifting in some respects.
It's a good life goal, playing it by ear. So I guess I said we'd get to this later on. We're now into the life lessons part. Uh, so if you could go back in time, I won't say how many years, but speak with your 18-year-old self and kind of give her advice, I guess, starting out in the fashion industry and where you were at that point in life, um, what would you kind of say to yourself? How would you maybe push yourself in the right direction, guide yourself, or leave yourself alone? What do you think
Uh,
you'd do?
yeah, God, when I was 18, I was such a mess, so angsty. Like, I wish I could go, but like, I wish I could prioritize like my health and fitness earlier. Cause I think like my first few years or my whole college experience, I was not healthy. I was like partying way too much. And like the physical like side effects of not being healthy, like affected me mentally. Right. So if I could go back, I'd say stop partying and like start taking care of your body, sleeping, eating well, and then, including fitness in your life. And I think too, like my self-confidence was like garbage when I was 18. So, whether it's fitness or some other hobby, I wish I had stayed with pursuing some sort of hobby through my, early 20s, because I think it would have helped me stay on a better path and build that self-confidence. because as you get like as I am now in my 30s, like I feel so much more confident, so much more like grounded than I did back then. So I guess that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self.
Could you find yourself less self-conscious even though you're more in a public eye right now?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, and it's funny because it's like, yeah, so many people are seeing my pictures and videos, but yet I like feel way more confident with that. Like I remember like when I started posting fitness photos, I was so insecure, and people can feel that, right? Like when you post something and you're insecure, like I'm sure it was very like
Yep.
cringe. So it is amazing. Like it's kind of like a muscle you have to train it, like like making content that like feels authentic and good and you feel good about yourself. And I think after just doing it for so many years, now I feel like much more comfortable than I did when I started.
And the interesting side of that too is I know you said you dabbled in powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, but you don't generally train for strength right now. I mean, you train to be strong and healthy, but I was speaking with a woman on Friday who's a strong woman and has set three world records in overhead pressing events, and she's I think 29 now. She got into strength training at around 25 or so, and she said that she would want to go back and tell her 18-year-old self to start lifting now and see where she would have been 11 years later as
Yeah.
opposed to just 4 years. So I think it's an interesting contrast that for you it's more of a mental and emotional stability, whereas for it's more for you personally as
Hmm.
opposed to for her. She wanted to be more on that world stage sooner.
Yeah. And I get that. I think I'm pretty aware that my genetic limitations are not meant to be an elite athlete. I think like I think when I started CrossFit in my like because I was in my late 20s, I think if I when I started I was like, "Oh man, if I had started when I was 19, like I could be a games athlete." But now I'm like, "No, you couldn't." I just, I don't have those genetics. But if this strong woman is setting world records, she knows she has those genetics to be an elite level athlete. And so youth does kind of matter, or at least time under tension. Like when you're going for strength, right? Like starting 5 years earlier definitely would help your strength. So I get that. I think I'm pretty aware that I would never have been an elite level athlete, unfortunately.
If you're doing it for you, then no one can take that away from you.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think that's all the time I want to take away from you today. I assume you're very busy.
So,
I promised you only 20 to 30 minutes. I think we've gone over by 6.
perfect.
Um, if you have any closing remarks you want to say, speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, this has been really great. So I appreciate you reaching out and love my Cornell community. So always happy to chat.
Very well. If you're ever in the area, you're more than welcome to come lift with us at Teagle and just shoot us a message and we can sort that out.
Awesome. I will let you know.
Thank you. And thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Bye. Take care.